Now, we are moving on to the next session before the lunch, that is the panel discussion 1, the power of employee engagement, strategies to drive motivation and productivity. I would like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Kamal Sahdev, Director, Human Resources, Delta Electronics, India, who is a HR development professional, oversees diverse HR functions including talent and acquisition, development, learning, industry academic collaborations, organizational development, performance management, and employee engagement. With global experience, he is a skilled communicator and problem solver for driving organizational growth. I would like to now welcome and introduce the panelists, Ms. Veena Joji, CHRO Apexon, Ms. Kankana Barua, Group CHRO Healthium Medtech Limited, Mr. Rajul Sharma, Director Human Resources, Collins Aerospace, Ms. Mary Kumar, Director Human Resources, mfine, Ms. Shilpa Rajan, General Manager HR, Bosch Global Software Technologies. Can we please welcome our moderator and panelists on the dais with a huge round of applause.
And it's an honor that we are here today in front of this privileged audience. I'm sure you must be thinking that food is almost ready. Even some of you who are at the last can maybe smell the food. But please bear with us. We will give you some food for thought before we really stepped into the lunch time. So today's topic, actually, the topic is very, very close to personally my heart because it is talking about employee engagement. Now, most of you who are here are responsible for running the show for HR department. There are two things which comes to judge our performance, the fraternity performance. One is the attrition and second is the engagement rate. So engagement becomes very, very, I would say, cornerstone for the performance of the entire organization as a whole. I would like to share one perspective here that engagement doesn't start with the management only or the manager. It is the prerogative of from both sides. For example, if you see a daughter-in-law, when she enters in a new house, is it the responsibility of a mother-in-law only to keep her engaged? So I leave you with that thought, and we start with the panel discussion now. So first, we have a very esteemed speaker, Mary Kumar. So Mary, we have one fundamental question which comes to our mind is that, is it the management or HR or is it both, which needs to come in together? And if you can share some of your experiences that how you have pulled that through and make sure that the engagement levels are fairly high in your organization.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Kamal, for the question. Very glad to be here to learn, relearn, and unlearn certain HR concepts from your practical experiences here. All right, getting back to the question, see, I come from a startup world. Every day is like walking on a thin ice. You have individuals extremely driven to the vision. They're very focused. We need to introduce a lot of initiatives to keep them together to achieve that one common goal. So a lot of efforts goes into initiatives for creativity, initiatives for consistency. Still, when we speak about culture, fostering a healthy culture, there are still simple elements that we need to be focused on, and we need to kind of emphasize on these simple elements with the interest of time. I'll just speak about three elements. One is engagement doesn't really start when an employee joins the organization. It even starts before, while we write the job description. right? How aspirational is the job description? Write it proud and loud. Make it look so big. Make it look like a dream. After all, we are in the business of selling dreams, right? Not just write the job duties. Of course, you can collaborate with your business to write the job duties for that role. But then it's important to write where this role goes from 12 months today, where this role goes from 24 months today, right? What would be the market capture? What would be the revenue numbers, right? Make it look so big that they already start dreaming and being there. After all, we are in the business of selling dreams and making sure they come true. That is one. And of course, I see still some of the HRs talking to the business for the job description. I feel it's the collaborative effort of the business and the HR to create a very, very big aspirational job description. Second, I would say trust. I know trust is an overrated word, but it goes hand in hand with empowerment, right? Simple examples like if the candidate is asking for a laptop, a different configuration laptop, why would you need 5 approvals, right? Empower your recruiter, empower your people managers to make a decision. That is more important. That's how you make them own, you make them accountable for what they do. And I would also say one of the things is, which I have personally experienced, and even in the last panel discussion, I think they spoke about gig workers, right? Talk and treat everybody with fairness. Even now, I read some of the traditional organizations, they have different quotas or grades for medical insurance, right? I see entry level has a different sum insured, mid management has a different, and the top management has different. So every life is valued equally. There cannot be a price tag. So all this kind of helps you build a culture where it is same benefit across. And how you're encouraging people to have a work-life balance. In one of the organizations, we introduce something called a hobby allowance. We are creating a well-rounded individuals, right? Most often in my one-on-ones, people used to say, Mary, I used to sing, I used to play guitar, I used to dance. So that defined them. Don't take away that from them with the work. Of course, the work is too much. The work is never ending, right? But then we created a hobby allowance which kind of helped create well-rounded individuals, and the productivity went up. We also did something like no carry forward of leaves. We encouraged people to take leaves. And of course, it is, as I told, I come from a startup world. We all know the destination, where to go, but every day we need to create a road, a new road. It's not the path that's already walked, right? We need to create our own road. So we encourage people to make it faster. I mean, the famous saying, like, fail fast, fail cheap. So we encourage people to try, we encourage people to experiment. That's how they get their own personalities to the table, and that's also embracing diversity. With this, I think we can achieve a lot in culture. These are very, very simple elements, but we need to kind of keep practicing, keep re-emphasizing, and we'll be able to achieve both personal and individual goals through this.
Very interesting. Actually, taking a lead from your sharing productivity and performance, these keywords, very heavy words. Moving on for another perspective to Veena, maybe you can come in that with your vast experience and in your own organization, how are you coping up with productivity and performance when it comes to relating it with engagement as well?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this platform to share an absolutely important topic for all of us in HR. Let me begin by starting to share our own story. We were 5 entities. Some were about 100 people, 200 people. Some were about thousands that came together to form Apexon, which is a digital services company in the last 2 years. And I head HR for them. Now, in the last 2 years, all of you know that we were plagued by multiple issues. It was post-pandemic era. We had the great resignation. We had quiet quitting. We had the talent war happening. Moonlighting. We had every sort of problem. And in between all of this, we had to also have leadership changes, restructuring done to the organization as we were positioning ourselves as leading players in the market. So it wasn't an easy job. Now, how do we go about engagement? We had to soon realize what is it that employees want, what is it that they are looking for, and then actually customize our interventions accordingly. So we took a step back. We did surveys. We realized that just doing surveys is not really helpful. We have to do real-time connects, so we did that. And then based on every information that came our way, we kind of had a very structured approach aligned to business priorities. So there might be a million things that employees want. There are a lot of things that an organization wants to do, but it also has to make business sense. So to put everything together, we kind of had a multi-pronged approach. First was getting the basis right. So your processes, policies, frameworks, everything had to be aligned and integrated, because that was the first and foremost important touch point for an employee. It was like food, clothing, and shelter in our organization. And then the second was technology. We kind of focused on how do we make this more customer-centric, and for us, consumer-centric. Consumers here are our employees. If it is not palatable for our employees, if it's not easy to use, employees are not going to be happy. So we chose tools, we chose technologies that is going to help them navigate easily, and learning platforms, HRIS systems, and so on, engagement, survey platforms, and so on, were made keeping the employees and their feedback in mind. With that aside, what we also did was looked at targeted interventions, engagement interventions, because one size does not fit all. What we did was we segmented our population and we kind of looked at engaging them separately. So for example, we wanted to increase our organic growth, and we identified our top 20 accounts based on margins, revenues, and employee feedback. And we created a platform for them to engage with executives, stakeholders, and HR. The advantage of creating that platform was that we were able to identify what were the challenges. We were able to allow employees to collaborate based on the verticals that they were part of, share best practices. We were also able to understand what are some of the things that we need to do for them to allow them to achieve the business results that we are perceiving. Most importantly, we were also able to tie or help them understand how what they are achieving or what they are performing, we were able to tie it to the end goal and make the employees understand how they play into not just creating an business impact or an organization impact, but also how it translates into end client and consumer experience. That was a big win for us. And that initiative was called Accelerated Connect with Executives for Employees. So that was a big win. And then apart from that, obviously, we were 5 entities, multiple values coming together. So how do we create a common set of identifiers or ways of working, which now are called values, and create a sense of belongingness in the organization? So with all this, what happened was in the last 2 years, I'm not saying we got it perfect yet, but what we have seen is a significant improvement in performance and elevated experience, not just for the employees, but also on the client side. So our CSAT has improved, our employee satisfaction scores have improved, and I must say that our attrition has also halved. So probably that answers your question.
That's lovely, actually, the sharing, and what I personally like, the approach of different strokes for different folks, that really worked in the case which you have shared. So moving on, we have another panelist where we have Shilpi Rajan. Maybe you can also, since you are working with a tech-enabled R&D lead for Bosch. So how do you think that technology can be mingled with the employee engagement, and if you can share some of the examples or some sharings, learnings, which other industry can also adopt from you?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I think pretty much the story is going to be very similar to what all of us go through, right, across. But I think, the shift that we have really seen in terms of where we were, a couple of years back when we looked at engaging with our employees, as opposed to where we are today, I think the differentiator really is tech and data, right? If you were to look at the entire spectrum, so to speak, I think we've drastically evolved in terms of our usage and leverage of data and tech. So some of the things that we've been doing is, things like, let's say, tailor-made rewards, making sure that they're instantaneous at the same time, they are experience-based. Real-time feedback, for an example, making use of, machine learning algorithms to make sure that we are aware of what's happening across the employee life cycle. And we're able to sort of measure and quantify a little more onto our effectiveness on some of these policies and processes that we run. On a whole host of these things, health and wellness, which is a big one. Someone spoke about the fact that the composition of our workforce is increasingly becoming the younger, Gen Zs that are actually coming in larger numbers, whose needs and aspirations are very different, from what we've traditionally seen. So how do we inculcate practices that appeal to them? How do we make sure that in the current Barney world, somebody spoke about the uncertainties that we face, right? Which is very real, and I think maybe not in the same dimension as we saw in the pandemic, but we still face this, day in, day out. So how do you really cater to aspects such as the emotional and mental well-being of associates? How do you make sure that you're relevant to what they're actually wanting from each of the organizations, right? So we've been largely leveraging tech in terms of calibrating the experiences that people have across the lifespan, employee life cycle. And I think that's one thing that we really think has sort of pivoted us, helped us to sort of move a little more intentionally in the direction of being, metric driven when it comes to some of our initiatives. And I think, I think that's the trend now, right? I mean, bespoke interventions that are based on what you see in terms of data. I think that's the table stakes for the HR function today. And we'll only get left behind if we really don't understand it or stay ahead of the curve when it comes to these. So I think a lot of changes that across in the industries you really see. Predominantly, if I were to look at maybe the two big ones, one certainly is predictive and proactive analytics, trying to look at data ahead of time, looking at patterns, looking at being able to predict what will come up in the future, likely to come up in the future. What are the possible challenges that we are likely to be faced with? How are we getting ready for those? And also in terms of personalization, I think hyper-personalization is something that everyone is talking of these days. And in organizations like ours, which is fairly large in terms of scale, that's often a challenge, right? So what we have looked at doing is cohort-based personalization. So we identify cohorts of associates where we really want to focus on in terms of, let's say, retention, for an example. And we look at what their needs and aspirations are. We try to gauge them from all the data sources that we possibly have. And then we kind of try to look at proactive initiatives that cater to the larger groups. And the cohort model works for us because it tends to give you patterns, because you're looking at a larger number of people, data coming in from people that share a context. So we are able to then come out with interventions that appeal to that mass. So, hyper-personalization is something that we really feel works, because the needs and aspirations are very different for different cohorts of employees, depending on their tenure, depending on their the work situation, depending on their context in general, right? So I think a brave new world of opportunity for us as HR professionals to really innovate in this space. And I think we are also on that journey, Kamal.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, I fully agree that data plays a very, very crucial role when it comes to boiling down to the problem issue. So sharing is very relevant in these times, and maybe in coming time when, like you have shared, the technology is also the integral part. So thank you. So far it's been the woman power. I would request my friend Rajul also to butt in here. So career advancement and growth opportunities are, we would say, integral part of employee engagement. How would you see as an HR professional, and what are the some sharings or learnings you would like to have it today in terms of to our audience, that what can really make a difference when it comes to these two aspects?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Kamal, for that question. I come from an aerospace domain where we manufacture, virtually everything that you see in an aircraft apart from the fuselage. Whether you see seats, the lighting systems, the avionics, the cockpit. so on and so forth. The connect with the organization is the essence as far as we are concerned or our industry is concerned, because for us it is very important that each and every product that is going into the aircraft has to be defect free, yeah, and every process has to be a Six Sigma process, and of course there are a lot of things that come, a lot of challenges that come up with this. Every day in and day out, we have to think about, what could be the potential challenges, and with the aerospace industry evolving on a day-to-day basis. So what we have done as an organization in Collins is that, we don't have any learning calendar. Somebody was talking about the annual learning plan and all. We don't have that at all. It is all about problem-based approach. We have, a lot of projects that keep on running on a day-to-day basis. We run at least, 4 lean leadership weeks, just to give you an example, where at least 40% of our employees participate on a rotation basis. And everybody, I think 6 or 7 people in that particular group get a chance to lead the projects in different domains. And once the person does that, they are able to showcase their efforts, their skills, what they are capable to do and to carry on further. And on that basis, we come to know what is the potential of the person, how the person can grow. We have also done away with our rating system. We don't have any rating system where we rate our employees. We do the volume versus value analysis on a quarterly basis. And on that scenario, we come to know, how the employees are performing on a given project. So it is basically, how they are connected with the problems of the organization, how they are able to solve the issues or the larger issues the organization is having. And that is very, very helpful in our parlance from the career advancement perspective. The second thing is that, we have got initiatives like the talent swaps. We swap the talent. If we see that, okay, somebody is working in a seats value stream, can he go to the avionics value stream, and and we can swap the talent over there. So that's how we enhance the skill by transferring person from one value stream to another value stream and all. So that's how we strengthen our talent management, the succession planning, and of course, the learning keeps on happening within the organization, and that's the whole ecosystem we work upon.
Superb. I think that's the key also, going forward, the way things are evolving, we need to have that kind of approach which is more open and flexible. So, okay, so my next question is to our next panelist. Hi, Ranjana. Kankana. So we have seen that we have talked about technology, data, and some growth opportunities and career advancement. How do you think that, what are some of the strategies, which can really have very important role in terms of employee feedback, because that's the pulse, from where the data is coming or what we want to do for them as an HR professionals. So what do you think, what are those strategies? Probably if you can share some of them, keeping the time in mind. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Kankana, and there's someone from Bosch, there's someone from Aerospace, you from related to tech, and then a startup. I come from a very different industry, and that's into medical devices. Medical devices, and why I'm talking about medical device, because this whole topic is about employee engagement. The industry that I am in is something to do with humans. So whatever we manufacture is something which directly goes for any surgery happening over the world. So we manufacture needles, surgical needles, we manufacture sutures, And very proud to say that I work for the largest Indian medtech company, which we are trying to be global as the largest Indian medtech company globally. Now, this is a vision which all of us, and my workforce includes my blue-collared and white-collared, and it differs from very, very sophisticated scientists, doctors, to the last field force, who are basically the workers in the factory, who work day in and day out to ensure that there is precision for every needle that is manufactured and goes out of a factory, which directly goes to a human being. So your question was in terms of taking feedback from employees and how do we take it, what is the strategy? Now, as she mentioned at the beginning, one size or one strategy will not fit here at all because of the diverse class of people that we are handling. If I have to start with the workers, and to me that's the largest and the most important aspect and most important resource that we have, is the people who are working in the multiple factories. And what we have seen is people working in the factories, people working who are the blue-collared workers, what they like is personal touches. And the personal touch, it's not just about someone of us in HR going and just connecting, having roundtable conferences or stand-up meetings to ask what is that they would want from an organization to be connected. I think we had nailed to a great extent the need of these workers. And for them, apart from giving the good wages and all, what is important is small things like, can we provide them, education loans for the children? Can we provide them housing loans once they completed a particular period of time? Now, it's very good to get feedback, to get connected, but very important to work upon it. And to me, we should not even have a strategy to get connected as a part of our employee engagement unless we first accept it, and second, unless we work upon it. Because if you do not work upon, say, out of 15, at least 5 things, then the whole strategy, whatever may be, just falls flat. So first and foremost, any connects, please make sure we take feedback and we ensure we work upon it. When it comes to the stuff, we also have a very large field force, which is basically scattered across the country in every nook and corner of India and many parts of the world. They also have a very diverse need, and that's very specific to a particular state, particular region, and therefore, for them, what is important for a salesperson, because day in and day out, during COVID times, when most of us worked from home, they were the first one after the first lockdown to be visiting the hospitals to supply and ensure that we have persistent and continuous supply of whatever is required in the hospitals. And at that point of time, what we had as a strategy is what would make them connected to the organization or be engaged to the organization, which directly had an evident impact on our attrition. What we did was, during that time, there were no pay cuts. They got their increments. They ensured they were given the variable pays. They were given incentives. And therefore, the kind of connects that we had with them by having panel of doctors, treating them over phone calls, not just to them, their families, extended families, friends, actually has created a connect and engagement to Healthium as a company, which we are still reaping the benefits of it. So coming to your question, strategies to get connected, have a talent engagement strategy is not so difficult unless we work upon it and actually try to understand the core in which it will touch the heart of every person who works in your company. That's actually the strategy we follow.
That's great, Kankana. I would say the touch points which you have talked about, that's very important. In fact, it reminds me some of the examples of some of the organizations where they send a whole loaded Mercedes car to the house of people like who are celebrating their anniversary. So these things really create, some
Which
memories.
company is that?
I will tell you there are many companies which are really believing, in touching very, very deeply. And these things which makes people it's a happy memory for a lifetime. It's not something you only work for an organization and it's off. So a really good approach and some really key strategies which you have shared. Thank you. Okay, maybe I'll also see, we have around 10 minutes, but I'll take one or two more questions, keeping the panelist backgrounds. Maybe, Shilpa, you can come in here in terms of, the hybrid model, which is very, very prominent and very, I would say, work from home, the buzzword. But in that scenario, I'm sure in your organization as well, and in our organization I come from, that also has a large chunk of R&D. So how do you keep the employees motivated? And I would say, some of the key strategies as a management, you would have followed that time and continued. So you can share that.
Sure. So in fact, I think I'll go back to what I was referring to, a couple of minutes earlier. When the COVID pandemic hit us, right, I think just like everybody else, we were also wanting to know how to really, get across this. There was a lot of volatility we saw in the talent market, On one side, and some of you who kind of know about Bosch also know that it's also an employer of choice. So we haven't historically seen too much attrition. But suddenly we started seeing people leaving us, and some of them without an offer in hand, just moving back to their hometowns to sort of support their families. We had, for example, requirements that we were trying to hire for. We saw an absolute crunch in the market for those skills, right? And even in cases when we went ahead and offered people, we had scenarios where people would come back and renegotiate for up to 3 to 4 times. Because such was the skew in the demand supply that we really faced. And soon we realized there is really no silver bullet. We have to stand on our feet, think differently, and move ahead, right? And that's when, even though as an organization, in the tech space, we are extremely data-driven. I think we look at data as an instrument to drive excellence per se. But I think the intentionality to bring it into employee engagement, I think that was the trigger point, when COVID happened. So we devised, in-house, there was a tool that was built by our own teams, which leveraged on an ML algorithm. And what the tool does is that it looks at every employee, the previous data of every employee, and the current data that we could get of every employee to really say that, hey, so-and-so is at a flight risk which is high. There's a higher disposition for that person to leave the organization. We also used explainable AI to a large extent, and that helped us to even say that, for a certain employee, if I click on the employee number, right, I get not only whether the person is at risk and what is the degree of risk, whether the person is green or red or amber. That's one thing that I get. What I also get is what are the factors which are prompting this employee to probably attrite, and I also get a view of what are the factors that I could talk through if I were to retain that person. So I get 2 sets of data. What is actually right now putting that person at risk? 2, what are some of the data points that I could use in conversing with an individual, which will sort of make the person or tend to make the person stay. So we use this actually as most of the base for our connects. And coming back to your hybrid question, I think it really helped us that we started the connects with associates based on this particular data well within the time frame that we were operating in hybrid. So, calling them back to office was not so much of a problem because way before that, the connect was established. I think I can safely say that, the level of acknowledgement that they had from the simple factor that we reached out and spoke, connected with them to understand what's working well, what's not working well. And many of them, in fact, came back and said they really miss that connectedness at work, I mean, with all the anxieties going around, they said that social capital is something they're looking forward to. And some of those voices actually helped us even to get people back to office once everything was safe. And while we operate in a hybrid mode today, we are in a situation where sometimes there are more people coming in than probably there are seats, right? But I think the fact that we used a combination of, let's say, tech and touch, like Raju just said, that, you know, the tech-touch combination, I think one cannot be effective without the other. And that's what our journey has been as well. I think it's sort of helped us realize how important it is to have that personal touch with these associates. And like I said before, we did this in a cohort-based manner so that this was more doable and we were not boiling the ocean. So that's been the story so far.
So thank you for sharing this, and keeping the time frame in mind, we have last question for the panel, and maybe Kankana or Mary, out of you two, you can take it. So what are your, I would say, in your career, say, what are your experiences which talks about, you know, how to really measure those productivity engagement levels in your organization? So if you can share one or two key points with our audience today, which can help us to strategize in a new perspective. Any of two of you can take it. I mean, yeah.
So I think you spoke about what are the, I didn't get your question.
For us, the measurement of you know, the complete productivity or engagement scores, what are the strategies which you make sure that it's there?
See, engagement scores, again, you have multiple ways of taking engagement scores, and I don't think I need to enlighten the crowd here. But I think what is more important is engagement score is an outcome which you try to measure to ensure that, you know, what are some areas that you could work upon. But I think what is very important to me is while technology definitely helps you in terms of getting your engagement scores to work on your next strategy, but the kind of workforce I deal with, technology or in the process of taking engagement scores as such doesn't really matter, because for them, it's how personally you take care of their limited expectations or aspirations or expectations that they have from the organization. So I think for me, if I have to talk about the blue workforce, then blue-collared workforce, very important to make it still personal, not try to make it too technology or technical enabled. Maybe from the perspective of data collection, it's fine, or analyzing the data, having predictive and all those buzzwords that we think about. But I think to me, to get personally connected with them and physically connecting with them would be the most important tool.
That's great. You have something?
If I had to add about certain metrics that you spoke about, right? And even the other panelists said that they have gone away from the performance management system or the rating system. So even we have tried that. It's no more about resource utilization. It's about potential development. And what even Shruti said, that they had a tool which kind of gives them the metrics on talent, on risk, and on criticality. So we have done that too, but of course we do not have a tool, but we encourage our hiring managers, people managers and our HRBPs to have regular connect to understand what helps them, what motivates them, and we kind of, you know, put it in a sheet, and that kind of gives us the intelligence on how to intervene, how to understand the risk, how engaged they are. That also depends on how happy they are, how the team is performing, and getting a lot of interventions like mental wellness as well. So we had a mental wellness partner who would talk to them. A lot of things they don't really share with teams or even HRBPs, how much ever friendly you want to be, how much ever you want to, you know, you make sure that they have a safety net. Even then, people don't really open up. So we partnered with a mental wellness partner, and it was like 24/7 for them and even for their family members as well. And today, all of us have some kind of mental trauma that we're going through. If we say no, we must be lying. So we need someone to talk to. And we had this partner, and they used to give us the scores of how the team is doing, how the managers are doing, and subtly we used to intervene and talk to the managers, and that kind of helped. And we also took a sign-off from all the managers that it's a very, very matured approach. Like, it could not be that you're the problem, but if you could see how we can solve it, right? It could not be that, it's not my problem, I don't care, from I'll see how I can help to make sure this person improves. It's not just professional, but also personal. We try to make it look like a team effort. Of course, a lot of organizations speak on a family metaphor. We try to speak on a team metaphor, that every team member is so important. The strength and the weaknesses and the opportunities are that we can use for each other's benefits. So these are some of the initiatives that we took to see a workforce which is more engaged, happy, productive, less attrition, and of course, going together. As I told, I come from a startup world. Individuals are extremely driven, but we have not challenge, but we need to take a lot of initiatives to keep them together. So these initiatives kind of, help us see that kind of performance and engagement with the organization and the overall goal. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have roughly 2 minutes. Maybe we can take one question from the audience, and I can see the guy. I mean, he's at the back. Yeah.
The end of the world.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Joseph. I head the Learning and Organization Effectiveness team at Grant Thornton. Very interesting conversation because we're talking about the power of employee engagement. I had one question, and probably one of the reasons why I'm here at this summit today. How do you think is the contribution of higher engagement? When we're talking about employee engagement, what sort of policies should one look at to create an environment where we are investing in our talent through higher education? That's part one. Part two is, what do we specifically do for people in the leadership group? Like, I know a lot of leaders are here. Now, how do I engage them as an HR? What do I do in terms of higher education, to keep them coming back to work? So if any one of you could answer that, maybe Shilpa, I would like to hear from you.
A counter question would really be that, is it really required that we give them a policy on higher education? So I would take a step back and say that we first need to understand the youngsters who are actually leaving because they wanted to pursue higher education. But I'm not sure. It all depends upon the composition of the workforce and what people are aspiring to do. With respect to the leadership task that you mentioned, how do we really cater to the leadership group? There again, I would imagine that one has to really get down to what people are looking for. Sometimes they are looking for coaches, simply someone that can guide them to make more meaning out of what they do in day-to-day life, at how they bring themselves to work. Because at the end of the day, what you are or who you are as an individual is what you will bring to your work as well. So no matter how many sessions you go for, how many leadership trainings you go for, unless it is a intrinsically driven change, it's hard for you to sustain that that aura that you're looking to kind of have, and the effectiveness you're trying to bring. So I think there again, I would go back to data. That would probably be the start point. And then, of course, trying to understand from that cohort that what is it that they're looking to do. And as much as possible, enabling some of these formal conversations, but more than anything else, I think conversations with people that will inspire even within the organization. That's something that we leverage in a big way. So we have a leadership gym, which looks at the early talent and how do we really build them up front, because we look to them as potential leaders in the future. We have fast track promotions that are delineated for that group of people. For existing leaders, we definitely look a lot towards coaching. So I myself am going through a kind of program that sort of helps build coaches within the organization. And the idea is to have a leader coach so that I am then able to, in my capacity, help other leaders who are coming up, right? So we try to do that because one is the scale, two is the requirements are very different. And often, it just gets boxed into, okay, send them for a higher program, let them go for a, maybe an IMB program. But that doesn't solve a problem really, because ultimately the consumer has to really decide. And I would go back to the hyper-personalization there, especially for leadership group. So that's the approach that we would take.
And to conclude, we can say that engagement is something, it's a journey, and as a part of this fraternity, we must put all our endeavors to make it as beautiful as we can. So thank you, and all the panelists are available. You can catch hold of them in case you have any other questions during the lunch. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank our moderator, Mr. Kamal Sahdev, and our panelists, Ms. Veena Joji, and Ms. Kankana Barua, Mr. Rajul Sharma, Ms. Mary Kumar, and last but definitely not the least, Ms. Shilpa Rajan. I would like to now invite Mr. Ashish Banka, Head Human Capital Talent Strategy, Cradle Wise, on the dais to do the honors. I request you to kindly felicitate Mr. Kamal Sahdev, Director Human Resources, Delta Electronics India.
That's what I said. I thanked everyone and then I called you and then I told Mr. Kamal's name.
Now, I would like to request Mr. Ashish to felicitate Ms. Veena Joji, CHRO Apexon. I request Mr. Ashish to felicitate Ms. Kankana Barua, Group CHRO Healthium Medtech Limited. Next, I request Mr. Rajul Sharma to be felicitated by Mr. Ashish Banka.
No, okay. इनका दे दो राजू राजू शर्मा का दे दो राजू शर्मा का दे दो
I request Mr. Ashish to felicitate Ms. Mary Kumar, Director Human Resources, mfine. And last but not the least, I request Mr. Ashish to felicitate Ms. Shilpa Rajan, General Manager HR, Bosch Global Technologies.